My pleasure and honor to give a short introduction to our preacher today. She needs really no introduction around this place. She has been a faithful member of this community for the last group of years and back in time for some earlier years. And she has already given her gifts in teaching Bible studies and so forth. I'll introduce her anyway, because there may be things you don't know. You may know that she's married to the very Reverend Bill Crawford, who just brought us the word. You may know that she has two amazing adult kids, Mari and Graham. You may not know that she has a PhD from Yale University, little school up in Connecticut. You may not know that she is currently a visiting scholar at Union Theological Seminary and biblical scholar in residence at Marble Collegiate Church. You also may not know that she has been my friend for the last 40 plus years, which is amazing considering we're barely 40 years old. So please welcome the Reverend Dr. Julie Faith Parker.
It's really a joy to have a chance to worship with you in this way on this day, especially after this terribly sad loss in our community and all that's going on in the world. It's really a gift to be together and to turn our attention to the love of God. Would you join with me, please, in prayer? Most merciful God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. For 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, I lived in Columbus, Ohio, while Bill and our grown children, Graham and Mari, were here in New York. Bill was senior pastor of a church in Lower Westchester, and I had been offered a tenure-track position at a seminary in Columbus, Ohio. Those of you who are academics know these positions are very hard to come by, so with the help of some frequent flyer miles, we made it work. One of the challenges for me when I got to Ohio, knowing no one in the state, was to build a life and a routine there. And at this time of year, I think of one part of my routine in my Columbus life, which was every Sunday morning, I would go for a run through this beautiful park that was located near my apartment called Franklin Park. And in this park, they have this long grape trellis. It's about 20 feet long and about 5 feet wide, and it's covered overhead. And at this time of year, the vines of the grape plant that was growing along this trellis, the leaves were very full and lush, and there would be these heavy, dark, small clusters of purple grapes hanging from this trellis. And so I would be jogging through this park, but then on Sunday mornings, I would just stop and I would walk through this trellis to appreciate it, and I would take one grape, just one, because I knew I probably shouldn't, but who's going to notice, just one, and I'd pop it in my mouth. And I'd always be struck at how different it tasted from a grocery store grape. The skin was much thicker, and there were always seeds. When you buy grapes in the grocery store, it's hard to get them with seeds. The skin was extra tough, and so the flesh tasted extra sweet. I would pause for just a few moments and reflect on all the effort that had gone into this grape and bringing it to fruition, pun intended. The writer of today's passage in Isaiah is only too aware of all it takes for grapes to come to fruition. To go from a little itsy-bitsy grape seed to a vine that can produce fruit generally takes between 5 to 7 years. Now it can take a little less, but that's because of genetic engineering. Back when this passage was written, it was 5 to 7 years. And even before you can plant that seed, you have to prepare the land to receive it. Here again, the description of the vineyard from Isaiah 5. My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill. He dug it and cleared it of stones and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower in the midst of it and hewed out a wine vat in it. The land of ancient Israel, where settlements have been archaeologically excavated, was hilly. To grow crops, people developed terrace farming, which is basically reshaping a hillside into a series of plateaus so that you can plant seeds and they won't just run down the hill when the rains come. You can still see terrace farming on the hillsides of Israel-Palestine today. The grape grower, or vintner, described in Isaiah 5, is planting on a hill, so he needs to dig the land to create terraces. Then he clears it of stones. Dig, clear of stones, that's 2 Hebrew verbs containing years of work. It's a big effort. Then, while waiting for the seeds to grow, the vintner protects his investment by building a watchtower. He needs to be able to watch vigilantly years down the road when harvest time comes, so his very labor-intensive investment does not suddenly get stolen. Then he makes a vat, so he'll be ready once the grapes have been harvested. He has done everything right, and then everything goes terribly wrong. The speaker of the poem introduces the situation. Who is she? Yes, she. Listen again to the opening of this poem. Let me sing for my beloved my love song concerning his vineyard. This passage starts like a verse from Song of Songs, which is a poetic book of love poetry in the Hebrew Bible, filled with a woman singing songs for her beloved. Most of us never pause to notice that the speaker in Isaiah 5 is singing for her beloved, who is a he. In the binary worldview of most of the Bible, that makes the speaker a woman. Maybe a woman even wrote this passage. You may have heard people say that only men wrote the Bible, to which I say, how do you know? It's possible that women wrote texts that made their way into the Bible. Some women, usually elite women like elite men, wrote in antiquity, and this poem starts out in a woman's voice. But if so, who might she be? Just go ahead 2 chapters in Isaiah. Chapter 7, verse 14. And a young woman conceives and bears a child named Emmanuel, but not Jesus. He is born hundreds of years later. In Isaiah 8:2, Isaiah goes to a woman who is specifically called a prophet. In Hebrew, this word is neviah, and is the feminine form of the very common word for prophet, nevi. And this neviah, this woman prophet, bears a child to Isaiah. There are female figures, or perhaps just one key woman, hovering on the margins of this section of Isaiah. Who is she? We really can't know definitively because there's just not enough textual evidence, but I have a plausible theory. First, a little more background. Isaiah is one of the most complicated books in the Hebrew Bible, and that's really saying something. There are at least 3 distinctive time periods compressed into this biblical book that we know as Isaiah. The first period, the first collection of books, generally chapters 1 through chapters 39, was written around in the 8th century, or the 700s BCE, before the birth of Jesus, before Common Era, when a prophet known as Isaiah of Jerusalem served the kings of Judah as a court prophet. Scholars think that this prophet had followers or disciples who continued his work through the centuries and kept his school of thought going and continued to write in his name. Perhaps one of these people in Isaiah's close circle, maybe even his partner, is a woman who is known as a prophet, Neviah, singing this song for her beloved. She seems to be defending him. He's done everything right. Then, with no warning, everything goes surprisingly wrong. After her description of his work, the voice of the poem switches to the vintner. He has planted the grapes. In Hebrew, the word for grapes is avanim, but instead he got, in Hebrew, be'ushim. It's a poem, so in Hebrew it rhymes. Our English Bibles render be'ushim as wild grapes, but stinky, rotten, foul grapes would be a much better translation. The word be'ushim is used in Exodus in the story of the plagues to describe the stench of the dead fish that come from the blood-filled Nile, or the stench of the dead frogs after that plague, or the stench of the foul, maggot-filled manna that's left over. In English, we hear be'ushim and we read wild grapes and we think, oh, maybe they're better for you, they're organic. But make no mistake, the grapes that are being described here are putrid. The voice of the poem changes a third time, from a woman to a man to God, who is enraged. God will remove the protective hedge from the vineyard, break down its walls so it will be trampled, make it a waste that will not be cared for, but instead overrun with thorny plants. Then, just to be sure that the vines have absolutely no chance of coming back, God will command the clouds not to rain on the vineyard. God expected justice, Hebrew, mishpat, but God bloodshed, Hebrew, mishpah. God expected righteousness, Hebrew, tzedakah, but instead got a cry, Hebrew, tza'akah. You hear those poetic puns? The poem goes on to explain that the vineyard is the people of Judah who have not obeyed God, and they will suffer the consequences, which historically they do when they eventually get conquered. What starts out as a love song ends up as a foreboding parable. And God appears to be pretty reactive with those putrid grapes. Why go to anger right away, God? Why not try a little reflection first? Or a different fertilizer, perhaps? But honestly, I get it. God is deeply upset because God has been betrayed. As of course you know, one of the great gifts of reading the Bible is that the text stays the same while we change. And so each time we come back to the text, we read it differently. And I read this text very differently than I have previously because I really get this feeling of being betrayed. I cannot tell you the particulars of my professional situation that led to this feeling, but I can tell you that I don't think I did anything wrong, and I ended up being very surprised and upset by what happened to me. I share this with you because I venture to guess that I am not the only person in this room to feel at some point in life deeply upset and betrayed, like me, like the grower of grapes in today's passage. So here are some things I have learned. First, I totally get the desire to rip down hedges and trample vines. Yes, I have been tramping on the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. I'm not proud of it. I'm just being honest. Second, hurt and anger are closely intertwined. Hurt is more focused inward, and anger is focused outward, but both emotions are uneasy and difficult, and a reaction to something that is wrong. So we should listen to them. But what do we do with them? Hurt we may process through tears, conversations, therapy, self-care, music, love from those who are close to us, and the support of a community that cares. Anger is trickier and more dangerous. Like others in this sanctuary, Kay, Ken, and I were at I did my theological studies at Union. Kay, Ken, and I were there together. Union is where I am now a visiting scholar, as you just heard. It's a school that I love, and it's also a place where anger is a bit of an ongoing theme. Yes. Aurora's there now. Union people are getting this, okay? Anger is good, I learned at Union, because if channeled correctly, it can lead you to work for change and justice. Yes, that is true. But anger can be very unwieldy as well. And to be hurt and angry takes a toll. We might not have the energy to take on more when we're feeling so depleted ourselves by hurt and anger. And sometimes changes to the situation are simply beyond our control. So here's what I suggest instead, that we turn to the grape. And I'm going to ask my grape passer-outers to please share with you these grapes, and I'm going to ask everyone to please take some grapes. If you are watching this at home later or now and you have some grapes in the fridge, I invite you to go and get some grapes. And if you're watching this later, please hit pause and go get one. And if you don't have any grapes on hand, next time you buy grapes, and they're in season right now, you might try this little exercise yourself. So let's get those grapes. So are grapes going around? We have grapes, yes? Okay, let's just pass those grapes. Just take a couple cups and send them down the aisle. Let's just get them now. I'm going to ask you to engage once you have your grapes. Don't eat them yet. Don't eat them yet, please, because we're going to do this very thoughtfully. You can finish the whole thing when I'm done. But right now, we're going to have our little grape presentation. We have grapes here? We have grapes? No, okay. Carla, can we have some grapes up in the front here, please? Yeah, there we go. There we go. Julia, thanks. Grapes up in the front. Beautiful. Okay. So as you get your grapes, come over here, please, Aurora. We got some folks over here who are grapeless. Okay? Once you have your small branch of grapes, how are we doing? We need some more? Okay, great. Let's get those babies going. Oh, this is a... Okay, great. Great, some more grapes, thank you. Once you have your grapes, I want you to please take one. Oh, these are key. These are our best grapes, okay? These, can we make sure everybody has... Okay, that's great, thanks. Okay, over here, please. That's great, to the corner, good. Once you have your bunch of grapes, I want you to please take one. Just take one, they've all been washed. Okay, and I want you to pop it in your mouth. As it's in your mouth, I want you to please notice how the outside is, of course, tougher than the inside. And you're going to discover that this is like the combination of life, right? Sometimes it's tough, and sometimes it's really sweet. And a lot of times it's pretty close to both at the same time. We're also kind of like the grape, right? We're all a little tougher on the outside than we are on the inside. We're all putting on our best show, our protective self for the world, regardless of the hurt that we may be carrying around, that we keep inside. And so the grape can remind us to maybe be a little more gentle with ourselves and with others, just as we need to be with grapes. Maybe your grape has a seed. Seeded grapes are pretty hard to find, but some of them do have seeds. If it does have a seed, I want you to take it out and look at it for a moment. But if your grape does not have seeds, you can try to see mine. I've got two grapes here on the end of my finger. And if you can't see my grape seed, it's because it's so small. A grape seed is about half the size of a grain of rice, if that. This grape seed is a metaphor for what I suggest we do when we feel betrayed. Sow some seeds. Leave behind the trampled vineyard. Our hurt and anger help us to know that we are better off not in the situation that produced betrayal. Notice how God in this passage is not in the least bit wistful. Know that there are other seeds to be sown. The little grape seed can remind us to do bits of good in the ways we can by planting small seeds that give root to honest, caring relationships and deeds of meaningful work and outreach of care and service. Of course, not all the seeds will take root. That's a different parable for another day. But some will. And like a grape seed growing into a fruit-producing vine, my friends, it's going to take time. So, beloved family of faith, may the woman's song of the vineyard in Isaiah offer a gentle reminder of what we already know. Sometimes it really helps to take the long view. Plant seeds that carry life-giving promise. Nurture them with faith, hope, and love, these three. And if we do that, I truly believe, by God's grace, eventually we will sow a harvest and we will reap justice and righteousness. Amen.
Amen.